he came in, and Steve, we were doing that, and I got him down, and we were having fun. He put me in a triangle choke, and I couldn't believe it. And he did it so nicely, and then he started to squeeze, and I was like, oh my gosh.
Welcome to the Martial Theory Podcast.
John, welcome to the Martial Theory Podcast. It's an honor.
Thanks, Steve. Excited to be here with you.
Why don't you start off just by telling everyone the short version of your background and expertise?
Yeah, the short version, I started martial arts in 1989. I walked into a karate school back in a small town that I was living in at the time. And it was a time in my life that I felt like I really needed some direction and some discipline. I was a young dad, and this was a kind of a well-known martial arts gentleman in my area. So walked in there, and I had always been enamored by the martial arts. You know, just as a kid, I grew up with the Kung Fu series and, kind of the Green Lantern a little bit. I just loved that stuff. So that's how I started. That was in 1989. Then I did karate for a while. I did Wing Chun Kung Fu for a while after that. And I was doing some things simultaneously. And I started teaching my karate school. And then in 1999, I opened up a martial arts school up in Rochester, New York. And then got into jiu-jitsu. And it was a judo-based jiu-jitsu. My coach was John Saylor out of Ohio, which was a judo man. But I had gone to the Gracie Academy back in 1995, believe it or not. I was out in California for something else. It was a women's self-defense kind of association that I had connected with, and went to the Gracie Academy, the old Gracie Academy in West Carson Street, and it was just it was amazing. And of course, that was the time when the UFC had come out, just a few years preceding that, and so took a picture with Hoist Gracie, and I had kind of the Tom Selleck look. It's so funny looking back now, but I just always loved that, Steve. I loved the martial arts in general, but I think I loved Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because it was like, it was empirical. Like you could see what happened, and I wrestled a little bit in high school, so I just loved that part of it. And so I got into that for a while and was traveling because there really wasn't anything around me. Then I got involved with a gentleman named Patrick McCarthy. Kori Uchinati was the style, and yes, I'm sure you heard of him. And amazing historian of karate, and I loved that and trained with him and trained with his group up in Toronto, and then received some ranking in that. And I think I said I opened up my school in '99, right? So in 2007, I opened up another branch in a suburb of Rochester, and then we closed the first branch in 2012. So I went back from two schools to one school, and that gave me the time, just good timing, to explore Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. So I had kept connected with them, and Henner and Hidon and Horian and what they had out at the Gracie Academy in Torrance, California. And they had a teaching program that was just, it was very it was attractive to me for various reasons, because I loved teaching, and I saw what they had on the periphery. I could see the program that they had, and because I went from two schools to one school, I had a little bit more time, so I remember calling them up and getting involved in their, they call it instructor certification program. Went through that, went through my rankings in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, and that's where we are now. Now our school is in Victor, New York, outside of Rochester, and it's strictly Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. And I always tell people, Steve, it's not because I don't love all the martial arts. I think they're all amazing. I truly do. I just personally loved Jiu-Jitsu. It's popular now too, so people were looking for it. And the teaching program that I went through was just incredible. And so with that, I was able to develop an instructor cadre. That they're amazing instructors I have here that love the art. I travel for the Gracies and teach GST, which is Gracie Survival Tactics, which is law enforcement training. Utilizing those same teaching methodologies, and that's where we are.
What is the thing about Gracie Jiu-Jitsu that eclipsed other arts for you? And I know we're not making any empirical statements here, but I want to know, not just in terms of your personal passion, but you must also see within it certain kinds of tactical or strategic or factors of technique that you also feel are worthwhile. Because obviously, it's possible for us to love an art and then also say, well, I love practicing my art, but maybe I don't really think it's the most effective for X or Y. But I think within your passion for Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, you do also think it's effective for X and Y. And I'd love to know what do you feel for you is the distinctive factor in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu that draws you to it, not just from a personal love standpoint, but again, from that functionality standpoint?
Yeah, great question, and I get asked that and love to talk about that. I think that there's some principles that are kind of the cornerstone of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu that I think is just for me it's always been self-defense first. And I think most of us, Steve, when we start martial arts, we say that, but then we get caught into the kind of the rule set. And again, not through any fault of anybody, but that's how we're able to kind of practice our martial arts in a lot of ways. And so Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, as compared to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, the more of the competitive art, I was kind of attracted towards the self-defense because I always had that survival first mindset. I think it's able to be pressure tested, where it might be a little bit more difficult to pressure test some of the striking arts. Where in Jiu-Jitsu, you can really pressure test it, and then as you know, you can just tap, and so, if you're working with good people, then you can really kind of go hard. And the other thing that really attracted me to that is it was designed for asymmetry. It was designed for the smaller person to be able to survive first against the bigger, stronger, athletic, aggressive person. And that's been Helio Gracie's whole kind of, his philosophy. And, there's stories, and I'm sure like with a lot of stories in martial arts, especially, Steve, there's some folklore behind it. But I do know that he was able to test that, and we saw some of his old matches. And then we saw when Gracie Jiu-Jitsu came to the United States through his son, Horian Gracie, and they had these, the Gracie Garage that I'm sure a lot of your viewers have heard about. And they had these challenge matches. And, the challenge matches on the surface, they sound very, very potentially violent, and they really weren't. And because of the way that Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, I think, handles their adversaries. So they would very often start with striking. They would get the person to the ground, and they were able to, effectively use a vascular neck restraint most of the time, or a joint lock to where the person could submit. So that, to me, being a small person, I really like the asymmetry. I like the ability to protect myself against the bigger, stronger person. That philosophy I saw right away. I've gotten to be very good friends with Henner and Hiron Gracie over the years, and Hiron Gracie has this acronym that he uses, Steve. It's called DECS, and those initials stand for Defend, Escape, Control, and Submit. And I feel like that is just the kind of the backdrop or the backbone of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. The way that I look at that is that I have to be able to defend first. I mean, I think you even in your book, you quoted the famous Mike Tyson quote that everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. But it truly makes sense. I mean, you can look at that at any level. But I have to be able to defend first, because if I defend first, I'm not going to be able to survive. Once I can defend myself to a degree with distance management, some level of punch protection, then I might be able to escape. And the reason I can do that is because my opponent has to separate in order to either strike me or to move. So it gives me a little bit of space in order to escape. Once I can escape, then I might be able to control the situation, meaning maybe I can sweep the person. Maybe I can get on top of the fight. Maybe I can do something from the bottom. And then the S is for submit. And submit is where I could apply a joint lock or a chokehold, or escaping to me is submitting, because I'm getting away from the fight. So the defend, escape, control, and submit acronym and strategy, I think, really epitomizes what Gracie Jiu-Jitsu is.
That's really interesting. You're offering a process in essence, right? That we hope to tactically move through these steps of combat in order to be able to win the day.
If you're enjoying this podcast, please subscribe, like, and follow. What takes 5 seconds for you actually means a great deal on our end. More than that, nothing is more powerful in our martial community than word of mouth. So please tell other martial artists you know about this podcast. Better yet, send it to them. And if you haven't already, please check out my book, Martial Theory, which has been called The Art of War for the Martial Arts, and which is available on Amazon in paperback, ebook, and audiobook formats. And if you want to join the movement of martial artists coming together to dig deep into martial arts theory and strategy, then join us at martialtheoryu.com, where a range of senior instructors and I provide instruction, articles, live events, Q&A sessions, discussion forums, and more. Martial Theory University is also where you can see instructors interviewed here demonstrate the concepts that they discuss on the podcast. And when you join us at martialtheoryu.com, please make sure you save 20% with the code MTPodcast. Finally, if you don't want to join us at Martial Theory University, but want to support the time and effort it takes to produce this podcast, then please support us on Patreon, which you can do for as little as $5 a month. But once again, if you join us at Martial Theory University, make sure you use the discount code MTPodcast for 20% off while it lasts. And now, this week's episode.
And I think it's interesting. A lot of arts don't seem to have that kind of laid out process or set of tactics that we're going to, or really strategies at this point, that we're going to try to employ in order to defeat the opponent on, obviously there are exceptions to every rule, but on a regular basis. Is that something that you feel is somewhat unique about Gracie Jiu-Jitsu?
I do. I think it's very unique. And again, I say this with the utmost respect of all the arts, but our arts, I mean, the martial arts are, a lot of the striking arts are theoretical. They almost have to be, to a degree. I mean, it's like doing a combat sport, and sometimes I'll equate that even to like a sport like, I don't know, football or rugby. I mean, the combat martial art, or the combat sport, let's take jiu-jitsu or MMA or sambo or something where there, or judo. I mean, all of these arts where there's real connection involved. You have to develop the ability to breathe properly. You have to develop the ability to deal with panic versus the presence of somebody. I think in those cases, a lot of times, Steve, your ego is going to collapse under the pressure. So you're going to develop you're going to hone your skills and your ability to pressure test what you know. So I think that, all the arts, again, I think they have their place. And also, we say Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I remember Patrick McCarthy saying this, and I don't remember verbatim how he said this, but he had an amazing kind of quote that he said, the human body only works so many ways. I mean, we all have the same body, Steve, right? You may have heard it. But we all have fingers that move. We all have joints that bend. We all have, impact, things that are going to impact us and affect us very similarly. So how we use that, how we use our body, is going to be very similar in all of the arts. So I think that the ability for Gracie Jiu-Jitsu to pressure test gave me the confidence to feel that it's going to be effective if the proverbial, what hits the fan.
Well, let me push back on you for a minute. And nothing on this podcast is ever truly judging another art. I'm not qualified to do so, and I'm not interested in trying to do so. But certainly there would be an argument to be made that most martial arts, maybe not all, the vast majority of martial arts are really designed for a smaller person to be able to beat a larger person. Or else, what are we doing? Because if I need to be larger and bigger in order to defeat you with my martial art, I really don't need my martial art to begin with. I've already got the major advantages of range and strength and size and so forth. And So Gracie comes along and it says we are particularly adept at managing the differentials between opponents and mitigating and diminishing the extent to which size matters. But all arts, I think, would say that. And all arts would also say, well, there are also thresholds. You know, I recently just saw a video, and there are tons of them always, but I saw a very adept woman at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu trying to fight somebody who had no experience, but he's basically the size and build of a linebacker, right? And she really couldn't do much because at a certain threshold, you can just lift her up and throw her across the room, and it didn't really matter her skill set as much as she would have liked. And I think that's true for any art, right? I mean, we all have our thresholds, for sure. But is it, where do you feel, therefore, that Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, maybe if it does, has that extra edge with respect to minimizing the differential that other arts don't? Or do you feel maybe that other arts don't really have that capacity, that it's somewhat of a mythology that other arts can cancel out size differentials and so forth? What's your thinking on that? Because to me, it's a complex question.
Well, I think I could go both ways with that. I think in the context of a conversation, Steve, I feel like jiu-jitsu doesn't necessarily allow you the opportunity to maybe to win better than the other arts, but to last longer, to survive longer. I mean, the energy efficiency component, we have a term that we use a lot, called manage the distance, manage the damage. And so we use this in law enforcement training all the time. But let's just take the context of of an altercation. We know how altercations start, and 90% of them, I think, maybe more, start because of egos or alcohol, right? So somebody drank too much or somebody got upset about something silly, and then words are exchanged, and then, you know, we could talk about this a little later, but my responsibility, and it's easier the more adept I am at my skills, the more confident I am, is to verbally de-escalate the situation and get home safe, right? But let's say that I can't. My ability to manage the distance, because I've been there in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I've been clinching and I've been clinched. I go to the ground, and the ground in the guard, which I'm sure you've heard of that position, is just a clinch on the ground. So I think it gives people the ability to utilize energy efficiency and dissipate the energy of the attacker a little bit more, because that's the way we practice. So it may not increase on a one-on-one confrontation. It may not increase our chances against a bigger, stronger person of the end of the fight, but it does give us more time. And I feel time is a huge component there. If I can last longer till safety gets there, till the person tires out, till tempers de-escalate a little bit, then I feel like that's an advantage that it may have. If I don't have the ability to clinch, to grapple, to hold on, then, and I have to rely on my amazing, kicks and strikes and all of that, which are going to be helpful, certainly. I can only punch 100%. I can only kick that way too. So if those don't work, or if they escalate the situation, then I'm a little bit stuck. So I don't know if that's a great explanation, Steve, but that's where I feel like, again, I don't feel one art has it all and one art doesn't have anything. And I don't think that in life. I was just talking to one of my students this morning about, something, another matter. I feel like a lot of times we have the conflict of opposites, I call it, where I say, this is good and this is bad. But it's never that way. It's always going to be in the middle. So Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, to me, is just what I feel gives people, the average person, the best ability to control the situation for the longest amount of time until they can de-escalate or extract themselves from the situation.
I think that's really well put, and I think it's a great insight that is a better way, I think, of framing the advantages that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu has over some stand-up fighting and so forth than I've often heard articulated, which is just that, it sort of makes size and irrelevancy, but this point that it prolongs the engagement, gives you time to operate and for other things to happen, I think is a very savvy way to put it. And something I always say about, from my ground fighting experience, which is not extensive compared to yours at all, but that one of the advantages that all grappling has over striking, and it's going to sound like it's a negative comment, but it's really not, is that grappling happens slower. And so it gives the individual also more time to react to what's happening. Whereas a jab, very hard, if you have someone who has a skilled jab, very hard to contend with the speed of that jab. Not to say we get hit every time by it, but that's the fastest thing in martial arts generally, right? Is a jab, maybe a quick knife stab or something like that, which is a jab. But once things are grappling, though things certainly happen fast in grappling, and I'm not suggesting anything to the contrary, but I'm suggesting relative to the speed of a jab, relative to the speed of a quick punch, whatever locks are trying to be employed, whatever submissions are being gone for, whatever chokes are being positioned for, is nevertheless gives you more time to compensate or adjust. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, I feel it's very accurate. Yeah, I don't think there's any question of that. Going back a little bit to the the combative arts, and by that I mean the arts that involve grabbing on and grappling. Okay, they're all combative to a degree, but I feel like like judo, wrestling, sambo. There are rules involved. There has to be rules involved to keep your activity safe and to let me enjoy this activity. So there's weight classes, there's time limits, there are points, there are all of these rules that need to be in place in order for me to enjoy my martial art. With Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, like to your point about seeing this smaller girl try to deal with a big linebacker-sized person, there's always going to be a huge disadvantage. People say strength doesn't matter. I think that's the biggest fallacy in the world. Strength does matter.
Amen.
Speed does matter. Aggression matters. But I do think that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, just because we do that and we grab on all the time, gives us a comfort level, this comfort in chaos. So the first time when we're teaching law enforcement, for instance, we might have a group of 50 or 60 officers, men and women, and there's a tendency for the outside person to think that the men and women of law enforcement are trained. They are not. They go through minimal training, some of them very little in their academies, and then they have minimal, if any, training, physical training outside of that. They go firearms training, they do their tasers, they do all this stuff. They're afraid out there. They have egos like all of us, Steve, and so that they may not admit that, but they are. And really they just want to get home to their families at night. So when we go in and we do a 1-week course, the first thing that we do is we just try to lower everybody's kind of apprehension. We generally get people laughing. We introduce everybody, and so there's this degree of camaraderie that's developed right off the bat. We're teaching them basic positioning, basic principles, position before submission, right? Comfort in chaos, manage the distance, manage the damage. These are the things that we know are going to have a long-lasting effect on them. And so we don't want the first time that they end up underneath the subject to be the first time that they end up underneath the subject. So they're doing this in class. And I get feedback all the time. We ask for evaluations after the class, but I share my personal information with you guys and gals after. And, I can show you my phone, and we keep in close contact, and, they'll let me know different things that are happening on the job. I would say 90% of the time, let's say 10% of the time only, it's that, this technique that you showed me, this position really helped me. I had to utilize it. Everybody ended up safe. It was good. 90% of the time, they say, I was able to verbally de-escalate. I was confident enough to go in there with weapons on my duty belt. Again, we may have this idea that they're confident and competent, and all of these weapons, they're afraid. So again, because we're holding them down, we're showing them how to hold somebody down. We talk about in law enforcement this principle, a rule called the 100-second rule. And that is where, if I was to ask you, if you were law enforcement, or even now, just as a civilian, what's the primary objective if you have to go hands-on with a suspect or a subject? What is the primary position that you want them? And you would say, I want them pronated. And if I said why, I would say so we could put them in handcuffs and get them to our car. Well, if a subject wants to resist and they're down on the ground, what's the one position that they have to get in order to get up? They need to pronate, right? So it's called premature pronation. Now, I understand the hurry for getting somebody pronated. And it's because that's the position they have to be in. Now, when they're pronated, not only can they start, we call it building the house, they can start pushing up and they can get up. Their hands can be hidden. Their hands could have access to a weapon in their waistband. All of these things can only be done if they're pronated. So we say, what's the hurry? So we have a 100-second rule. And I'll joke a little bit and I'll say, if you can hold somebody down about 10 seconds in a mount position where they're supinated, before pronating, you got about a 10% chance of affecting the arrest. If you can hold them down 50 seconds, about a 50% chance. 80 seconds, about an 80% chance. 100 seconds, you have a 100% chance of pronating them and affecting the arrest in the most minimally invasive way possible. And I tell them those numbers are all made up. But the point is not. The point is that we want to exhaust the subject as much as possible, verbally de-escalating. We call it dynamic de-escalation, before pronating them, and that pronation should be almost voluntary at that point. Okay, but we pound everybody down, we're going to turn you over, we have to get you in cuffs. Now, will every situation end up like that? No, but many, many will. And so we call it the 100-second rule, but the bigger point is energy efficiency. Let's see if we can tire this person out, maintain our safety while we're talking them down, verbally de-escalating, so that we can adhere to our objective.
Curious as to what, moving away from law enforcement, in your own practice of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, what was an insight that you gained into the application of the art itself, the nature of the art, that transformed your practice? What was a pivot point for you in your understanding of how to make this stuff work?
Yeah, great question. It's come over time. I think initially I just liked it because I just liked the physicality. And don't get me wrong here. I'm not like an energy. I don't need to have this like high level of energy all the time. But I liked the idea of being able to kind of grab on to somebody, hold them down, and then I loved the idea of trying to give myself space in order to breathe or inside position, all that. But I'll tell you, over the years, the time has really increased and improved my love of this particular art. Because, I did tournaments, I did karate tournaments when I was younger, and, they were fun, but, man, I saw the limitation of me trying to spar. Now, it was point sparring, right? We had pads on and everything, but trying to spar with somebody that was taller or just longer or, bigger athletic. Because there was no weight classes, it was by rank, And so over the years, I've just felt like I can practice better. I know I'm 60 years old now, Steve, and I'll tell you that my recovery time, I don't care what anybody, I try to keep myself in shape and all that, but Jiu-Jitsu has allowed me to stay on the mat longer. I believe that if I only practiced some of the more striking arts, or some of the higher intensity Muay Thai or some of those arts. So there wasn't an exact time. I think initially I just loved it because I was attracted to it. Now, let me say this too. I think almost as a responsible martial artist, and I may get in trouble for saying that because people will say, well, I'm not responsible unless I do maybe what John's suggesting. But I think as a responsible martial artist, we should all train in all the different distances and the different arts. So I feel like everybody from a striking background should train in jiu-jitsu or in some of the connecting, and vice versa. I think everybody should train in weapon defense. I feel like martial arts has been going that direction for quite a while now. It's almost like CrossFit. CrossFit was a combination of all the different modalities of exercise kind of coming together. And I see that a lot now in the martial arts. I see some of the schools that are staying kind of very strict to their upbringings and their background. And I think that's amazing. They love it. I used to be very protective of what I did because as a young person, I did it because I loved it. And so it was natural, I feel like, for me to become protective of it. But I just feel like over the years, there's so much benefit to be gained, both physically, spiritually, if I may say that, and you know, in humanity, in our humanity efforts to bring all of these different arts and all of these different kind of energies into our practice.
One of the things that, as we do as part of this podcast, that makes us a little distinct is that, you know, after we do this podcast, you're going to go shoot some footage of demonstrating some of the ideas that we're talking about here. One of them, I hope, is going to be manage the distance, manage the damage, because I'd love to see how you play that out. But I want to return to my previous question. I don't think I phrased it well enough, because I hope this is something else that you'll share on video in your terms of application. And that is, you kind of gave me where your love for the art, a pivot point for your love for the art. I'm looking for a pivot point in your understanding of the art's capabilities, of its tactical, its physical capabilities, its martial capabilities. What's an insight that you gained at some point in your training, could be a recent one or a long time ago, that really escalated your game and gave you an insight perhaps into Gracie Jiu-Jitsu or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu that I don't want to say is potentially unique, because you don't know if other people have had it, but feels like something unique for you, or a particular insight that struck you in a certain way?
Understood. Yeah. So with that question phrased that way, yes. Then a couple of particular instances in my life. I remember back in my karate days. So I'm going to say I'm just going to throw out 91 or 92. I don't know, right in there somewhere. I love wrestling, and you know, the guys and the gals that we would train was mostly men at that point. But we would do karate, we would do our stand up, and we get in and we try our judo throws a little bit. We get on the ground and we would just kind of wrestle. We really didn't know what to do. You know what I mean? But it was okay. I mean, wrestling could hold somebody down and have some fun. And so, but then I remember, and it might have been a little bit later. It might have been 93, 94, because you had come into the country. And there was the son of one of our black belts who had come to the dojo, and I think he might have been a blue belt with Carlos Machado. I don't even know where Machados were training back then. It might have been Texas, but he came in, and Steve, we were doing that, and I got him down, and we were up front. He put me in a triangle choke, and I couldn't believe it. I had never really seen one before. Maybe I had, I don't know, and he did it so nicely. You know, he kind of put it on, and my arm was through, and I was kind of still moving around and wrestling, and then he started to squeeze. And I was like, oh my gosh. Now, here was a person who I knew didn't have the martial arts, the stand-up martial arts experience. In my mind back then, didn't have the martial arts experience that I had. I might not have been a black belt, but I was close at that time. And that happened. I was like, oh my gosh. Now, I had already been interested in jiu-jitsu, but that was like empirical evidence. So the second instance, maybe a year or so later, I was doing similar drills with another black belt at our school, and this guy was a wrestler. And we got down onto the ground, and at that time, I had purchased some of Horian and Hoist Gracie's VHS tapes. They had a whole series back then in the day, right?
I remember the series, yeah.
Yeah. And so and we would train them a little bit, but the one guy that I was kind of, sparring with, I don't think he saw him. He wasn't one that I was watching the videos with. And so we got down onto the ground. He was a really good, strong guy, and I got him into a position. I was on top, and I had him in this position, it's kind of like, a head and arm choke. So I had his arm through. It was kind of like a triangle, but I used my arms, and the guy tapped, and I was like, oh my gosh, so, and again, I was very young, so I was, I didn't jump up and down, but I was in my mind, I was like, oh my gosh, this really works. Had I not done that, or, something similar, that was the first submission that I had put on somebody where they couldn't get out. And the fact that it was a bigger guy and a wrestler made me think, oh my gosh, I mean, it added validity to my excitement and what I wanted to continue to practice. So, yeah, those were two times that I recall.
One of the things that I talk about in the book, Martial Theory, about martial arts, and you referenced it earlier, is precision before submission. And there's an adage in from Henner, which is move first and third. And the concept that I talk about, the theory that I talk about in martial arts around it, for every martial art, is the importance of being able to create the future. That we're doing certain things that are prompting our opponent to do certain things, that certain responses, and we sort of know what those responses are going to be. And as a result of those responses, we can kind of be waiting for them to execute those responses so that they fall into our trap, in essence, right? And I think that that's something that we see play out very clearly in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu a lot, because it's a chess match. And there's so much of that strategic force of moving a certain way to get them to adjust in order to get them into a position where you can do the technique that you really wanted to do in the first place, but you had to set it up through a series of moves. How does one learn to create the future, therefore, in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? What is the practice within the art that makes them proficient at that? Because it's really an amazing skill set.
Yeah, well, I think it may be an amazing skill set, but I think I can give you a very simple answer. Connection is key. If I can connect with somebody, I can slow down the fight. And calm is a tactical advantage. And so in my training, when I can connect with somebody, numerous times throughout my training weeks and months and years and everything, that gives me a sense of calm. I know that if I'm hugging you tight, Steve, you're not hitting me for the most part. If I'm not connected with you and you're swinging at me, there's no calmness there. I don't care how many times I've been punched at. It's impossible. So, that one surprises non-grapplers a little bit. That concept surprises them. Now, they're comfortable with striking. They've been struck, they've been punched and kicked at. But I think if I can stay connected and I can remove space, I can remain calm. And again, calm is a tactical advantage. Calm lets me to determine what my next move may be. And I'm telling you, man, I hope I'm not overstating this, but my next move, many times now, especially because I do look at this even more as a self-defense and a survival, is to get out of there. Can I get out of there? And if I can get out of there, I'm going to try that first. I'm not going to, I'm not beyond telling you that when I was younger, it was about getting somebody to the ground. The basic premise of jiu-jitsu, as it was taught to me originally, was close the distance, get the fight to the ground, control the position, submit your opponent. That's what it is. And that's, and it's still practiced that way in competition. And that may be true. We have to have some order in order to kind of subjectively train in what we like. Fine. However, I am always going to close the distance. I'm going to try to get the fight to the ground. But I know because of my size, I may not end up on top. What I'm not going to do is let somebody end up on top of me in mounted position. I am going to connect with somebody, and I'm going to determine the space that I need to get somebody out. If I'm holding on to them, they want to separate in order to either get up, punch, grab, or whatever they may do. That space, Steve, will allow us to insert limbs, to gain some inside position, and to either extract ourselves, or if we need to submit, then we'll do that. The submissions in jiu-jitsu can be applied by anybody. And I know I said that it's almost, ubiquitous with Brazilian jiu-jitsu is that anybody can do it. But I'm telling you, I've seen people over the years. I've had thousands of students just because of my longevity in this art. And I've had them come back to me, self-defense situations, when they've been able to submit somebody. I mean, many, many times. I've had a lot walk away from fights too, but I mean, young people, women. And so, the theoretical became empirical to me very quickly.
Before we continue, just a quick reminder that if you want to see our guests demonstrating the theory they discuss here on the podcast, then join us at Martial Theory University by going to martialtheoryandthelletteru.com and make sure that you use the coupon code MTPodcast for 20% off while it lasts. Also, if you're enjoying thinking theoretically here, or even if you just enjoy thinking at all, and you want to learn more about it for your career, as a parent, or just for your own development, then please visit my Substack, Perlman Actual Intelligence, for tips, instruction, and discussion on critical thinking. Just go to Substack, Perlman Actual Intelligence.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the idea of controlling space in jiu-jitsu? Because generally speaking, right, the adage is that space is the friend of the attacker, and not the friend of the defender, and that the defender wants to take away the space. But you're suggesting that there are other opportunities to use the gaps in space that are created advantageously. How do you control it with the opponent, and what are your objectives with respect to that space? Is it tighter, looser? When to open the valves and where? It seems like space is such a critical factor.
And I had been speaking previously about connection, and when people hear connection, they think close, and it is, right? I'm connecting somebody, but space control is utilizing that connection and maybe being the initiator of the space. So yeah, I do want to stay close, and this is going to change with your degree of the context with which you find yourself in the situation, and also with your experience. So maybe somebody initially, we're going to have them just kind of hold on and just wait, just tire the person out, where somebody very quickly in their experience with jiu-jitsu is going to be able to start to create space within there. It's hard to kind of talk about this without doing it, so remind me too, maybe, and I can show this when I do the demonstration. But let's take a position, Steve, where I think all of your viewers will understand, and that's being on my back in a position we call the guard, where I'm holding onto the person, I have my legs wrapped around their back. It's basically a clinch from the ground. When I get down there, first and foremost, my mindset is do not get hit. Withstand the storm. Okay? Because people are going to get down there on top of us, and they're going to try to do different things. They're going to try to pick us up. They're going to try to punch. They're going to try to do different things. I can control the space down there to a degree with angle management, with trying to posture prevention, holding them down, making it very difficult. The whole time knowing if space is created, I'm going to fill the gaps. I'm not going to let the gaps be filled by their strikes. If they were to lift me up off of the ground, if it's a big person, I'm going to disengage. I'm not going to let that person lift me off the ground so that they may put me back down on the ground. So these are all done through practice, but it doesn't take that long. It really doesn't, because we're doing it in a way where it's safe. And this goes back to the teaching methodology. People have to feel safe, and they have to feel that that their instructor has their safety is number one. So this almost goes full circle back to the teaching methodologies. It truly does. If you think about this, and I know I'm veering away from your question a bit, Steve, but it's almost like I feel like I really want to say this. Somebody coming into our martial arts school, sometimes we have to remember to look at things through their eyes. We call them white belt eyes. So I'll just take jiu-jitsu. Somebody has to make that call, or they see our site, and they have to make that call, and you can picture what they're thinking. And we don't train athletes. We train self-defense. Now, some of our students have done competition. That's fine, but my love is to train the person that needs it the most. Right? Just the average person who wants to utilize martial arts for self-defense, but they also want to use it for community. They want to do it for some exercise. It's a very holistic approach that most people, the idea that people got beat up and now they're going to find a martial arts, that's a little bit kind of Karate Kid age, I feel. So think about this. They're online, they're looking at it, they make the decision to contact us, whether it's through an online form or they call. They're coming in, they don't know anybody. They're putting this uniform on them, this gi. To them, it's like pajamas. They're getting on the mat. In their mind, they're like, oh my gosh, I hope I just survived this. I don't know this person. I don't know these people. So my first 15 minutes of any orientation is simply to get that person to feel comfortable and encouraged by what they're about to do. Once I have that, the relationship started, and, ultimately they're going to decide whether they want to continue to train, but they're not going to, I don't want to say they're not going to I tell everybody, we give them all a 10-day trial, and I tell them at the end of 10 days, you'll decide whether this is something that you want to continue for a while or not. It's going to be completely up to you. But what you won't feel intimidated, you won't feel discouraged, you won't get hurt. So you'll make the decision whether you want to continue or not based on whether you think this is something that's going to add into your life. And I'm telling you, man, we get so many people that will stay because of that.
Interesting. That's a great way to bring it to people and take the pressure off there, because I think lots of people are intimidated when they're thinking about taking up a martial art, and they have the very concerns that you're talking about. On that note, then, and as we wrap up, and subscribers, of course, to the university are going to benefit from seeing your demonstration of these things, and I hope more people sign up and get to see it. But what's a piece of advice you have for younger, less experienced martial arts instructors? You've been teaching a long time now. You've been around the arts for a while. And I'm sure your teaching has evolved a great deal over the years. And you were just talking about aspects of that. So I'm curious, for all the instructors who are listening, for all the would-be instructors who are listening, what's one piece of advice you would have about how to be a good instructor in the martial art, Gracie, Jiu-Jitsu, or any?
Yeah, I would say utilize a system of teaching. Look at teaching just like you look at your martial art. We use something in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu called, we have a teaching methodology, and it involves shading. It involves framing a technique. And then we talk about the what-ifs of that technique, and then we forecast future variations of that. And then we go to the physical demonstration, Steve. I'll layer information. So I'll do like a silent demonstration. And then I'll do like a 3-word demo, like grab the wrist, block the head. And then after that, I'll shift my angle, and then I'll use one sentence. And I'll say, grab the wrist by using a C-grip. Frame the neck with the forearm. So I'll give them a little bit more layering. All the way down through, I'll do a bad guy demonstration. I'll do a solo demonstration with my partner removed, because sometimes, especially in jiu-jitsu, the students' eyes are, they can't quite see everything going on. And then when we release them to go practice the move on their own with their partner, there's things we call release reminders. So it's a system, just like if I was going to do a system of a kata and karate or whatever. So we call it that, and you're a professor. I know in many circles there's scaffolding. It's called scaffolding, right? It's how to present your material in a way for maximum retention. And so I would say anybody that wants to become an instructor, you already have the love for the martial arts if you want to instruct, and continue that. And there's this. We all have a little bit of this imposter syndrome where we feel like if we don't keep sharpening the sword, that our skills are going to go down. And of course they may, but that's not what's going to make or break your ability to influence so many people over the years as an instructor. What's going to make or break that is your ability to connect with them, develop a relationship, and to lock arms with them and walk them through this path. And I'm telling you, once you have that, you'll have students for life, and you'll have a life that you only dreamed of.
What a marvelous thing you said, and a beautiful way it was put. The idea of scaffolding instruction, I think, is something that much more of the martial arts community could benefit from, because I think the vast majority of instructors never really got instruction in how to teach. And so they just taught the way that they were taught, or they taught in ways that they think are capable. And a lot of them, of course, very successful. But scaffolding the instruction of a technique and building the layers of a technique for students, I think is great advice. They're
very well-intended instructors, and they love it. They're just, it's just gonna help them out so much, because we fire hose people. We have all this great information we want to give them. You've been to seminars, Steve. I've been to seminars. We have an amazing instructor. Let's just say world champion or whatever they're doing, and man, they're up there for 10 minutes and they're giving us this detail and that detail, and this and that, and then grabbing this way, and if they do this, then do that, and then they say, okay, you guys break, and we go over, and I go over my partner. I'm like, where do we start? What position do we start in? So it's just that fire hose. So yeah.
And last question then. So martial artists around the world are listening, And if you had a message of posterity for all the martial artists in the world who are hearing this, what's something that you think the martial arts community these days needs to hear?
Wow. Well, I'll say this. I feel that you have such a gift. We have such a gift to give people. Even saying that sometimes makes me a little embarrassed because it's, who am I to say that? But I'm just saying we all have gifts, Steve. We're all in martial arts. The people that are watching this, even if you're not a school owner, or maybe you're not even running a program, but you're affecting somebody with your martial arts training, even if they're not on the mat with you. It's in the conversation by how you carry yourself. So we have such an ability to improve the humanity in this world. And I feel like, and I truly mean this, 99% of us are good people. We're bombarded with the headlines in this world now of all the bombastic things that are going on and all the division and divisiveness. But we all really want the same things. We want to feel loved. We want to help other people. We all want a purpose. And I think the martial arts gives us the ability and the platform to do that in a way that I don't know too many other venues that would afford me or others the opportunity to do that.
Beautifully said. John, thank you so much. It's been a real honor having you on here. Really appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Please share the work we're doing here with other martial artists. And of course, please subscribe and follow. To see instructors interviewed here demonstrate the theory they discuss, join us at Martial Theory University by going to martialtheoryu.com and make sure you use the discount code MTPodcast for 20% off while it lasts. Finally, if you generally enjoy thinking and want to learn more about it, then please join my Substack, Perlman Actual Intelligence.